My name is Rachel Thornton. I'm 29 years old. 3 weeks ago, my father sat me down at his kitchen table and slid a laptop across the surface. On the screen was a spreadsheet, rows and columns, every diaper, every meal, every school supply I ever touched, itemized, totaled, highlighted in red. $400,000. That's what my family says I owe them for the crime of being born. But this story isn't really about that spreadsheet. It's about a phone call I almost never received, a hospital room I was locked out of, and a flip phone, old, scratched, barely holding a charge, that a dying man pressed into my hand with shaking fingers. A phone that held three things my father never wanted me to find. Before I tell you everything, if this story hits close to home, go ahead and hit like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with it. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know where you're listening from tonight. Now let me take you back 4 months. To a Sunday in October, when my father called and said two words that changed everything. Family meeting. I grew up in a split-level house on Ridgefield Drive, 20 minutes outside Columbus, Ohio. Nice enough street, neat lawns, the kind of neighborhood where everyone waves but nobody really knows what happens once the garage door closes. My mother died when I was 5. Ovarian cancer. I have 3 memories of her: the smell of her lotion, the sound of her humming in the kitchen, and the way she'd tuck my hair behind my ear before bed. That's it. 3 memories. I've held on to them like glass. My father married Diane when I was 7. She brought order to the house: clean counters, a chore chart on the fridge, and a green ledger she kept in the junk drawer, the kind you buy at an office supply store. She wrote in it every week. I didn't know what it was until I was 12. I opened it looking for batteries and saw my name at the top of every page. Below it, numbers, groceries, Rachel's portion, school shoes, Rachel, dentist copay, Rachel. Every dollar spent on me, logged in blue ink. Kevin came along when I was 10, my half-brother, Diane's first biological child. After Kevin, the math in the house changed. He got new clothes. I got his hand-me-downs, which didn't even make sense because he was younger and smaller. He got the bigger bedroom when he turned 8. I kept the one with the window that didn't lock. The only place I ever felt like I belonged was my grandfather's farm. Every summer, Howard Thornton would pick me up in his truck, drive 40 minutes into Licking County, and hand me a sanding block. He taught me to build birdhouses, read a level, and cook eggs that didn't stick to the pan. He never once wrote down what I cost him. I didn't know Diane was keeping a running total, and I didn't know she'd eventually ask for every cent back. I left home at 18 with a scholarship to Ohio State and a part-time job scanning groceries at Kroger. Gerald stood at the front door the day I loaded my car. He didn't help carry boxes. He just leaned against the frame and said, "Don't come back broke." I didn't come back at all. Not to live, anyway. I finished my degree in accounting. 4 years, no breaks, 2 jobs at a time. I graduated with $1,100 in savings and a job offer at a small firm in Westerville. Cubicle in the back, fluorescent lights, a boss who microwaved fish on Tuesdays. It was mine. I rented a 1-bedroom off State Route 3, paid my own utilities, bought my own furniture, mostly secondhand, mostly fine. I filed my own taxes, fixed my own sink, cooked my own meals. I owed nothing to anyone. But every Thanksgiving and Christmas, I drove back to Ridgefield Drive. Not for Gerald, not for Diane, for Howard. My grandfather would sit at the end of the table, quiet, watching. He never said much at family dinners, but afterward, when everyone moved to the living room, he'd find me in the kitchen doing dishes and say, "You're doing good, kid." 3 words. They kept me upright for months. The rest of the visits were tolerable, until Diane started her reminders, little ones at first. "You know, Rachel, that braces bill was almost $6,000. Or, I saw your apartment pictures online. Must be nice to spend on yourself." Gerald would sit in his recliner, nodding, not adding, not stopping, just nodding. I thought that was the worst it would get. A few comments over turkey, a few loaded silences over pie. Then Gerald called on a Tuesday night. His voice was flat. "Family meeting, Sunday. Be here." I pulled into the driveway at noon. Kevin's truck was already there. So was Diane's SUV, the new one, pearl white, financed. Inside, the kitchen table was cleared. No food, no coffee, just Gerald at the head, Diane beside him, and a laptop open between them. Kevin sat across, scrolling his phone. He didn't look up when I walked in. "Sit down," Gerald said. Diane turned the laptop toward me. On the screen, a spreadsheet. Not the green ledger from the junk drawer. This was the upgraded version. Columns for every year of my life. Diapers. Year 1, $1,200. School supplies 2002 through 2010, $4,800. Groceries, Rachel's portion, calculated per meal, $72,000. Medical, dental, transportation, clothing, extracurriculars I never asked for. A cell in the bottom right corner, bolded, $401,637. "We're not asking for all of it at once," Gerald said. "Monthly payments, $2,500. That's fair." I stared at the number. My chest felt hollow. "What about Kevin?" I asked. Diane didn't blink. "Kevin is our son." "Our son. Not Kevin is also your father's child. Our son. As if I was something else entirely. A tenant, a project, a line item." I looked at Gerald. "Does Grandpa know about this?" Gerald leaned back. "Your grandfather agrees it's reasonable." That sentence hit harder than the spreadsheet. Howard, the man who never charged me for a single summer, who pressed $20 bills into my hand every time I left the farm, agreed I should pay for being raised? I drove home in silence. No radio. I called Howard's number from the parking lot of my apartment complex. It rang 4 times and went dead. Not voicemail. Dead. I tried again the next morning. Same thing. And the morning after that. 3 weeks of silence, and I had no idea why. Gerald didn't wait for my answer. He started calling relatives. Within a week, my phone lit up with numbers I hadn't seen in months. Aunt Patricia, Uncle Dennis, cousins I barely spoke to, all of them circling the same script. "Your parents sacrificed everything for you, Rachel." Aunt Patricia was the most direct. "Honey, 400,000 sounds like a lot, but think about what they gave you. A roof, food, stability. That's priceless." I wanted to say, stability? In a house where my mother's photos disappeared the week Diane moved in? Where I was grounded for crying on my mom's birthday because it made Diane uncomfortable? I didn't say any of that. I just said, "I appreciate you calling." Diane went broader. She posted on Facebook, no names, but anyone in the family could connect the dots. "Some children forget what it cost to raise them. Heartbreaking when your own flesh and blood turns their back." 37 likes, 12 comments, all variations of "So sorry, Diane," and "You deserve better." I stopped sleeping through the night. I'd wake at 3 a.m. and stare at the ceiling, running numbers in my head. Not the spreadsheet, but something worse. The math of what I'd lose if I kept saying no. Family dinners, holiday invitations. The thin thread of belonging I'd been clinging to since I was 7 years old. But the thing that ate at me most wasn't any of that. It was Howard. Gerald said my grandfather agreed with the demand. Every time I called Howard's phone, it rang into nothing. No voicemail, no pickup, just a hollow tone, and then silence. Gerald's explanation was always the same. "Dad's tired. He doesn't want to be bothered." I believed him. I shouldn't have, but I did. Because the alternative was something I wasn't ready to consider. On a Saturday morning, I drove to the farm. 40 minutes on Route 16, windows down, gravel kicking under the tires as I turned onto County Road 12. The house came into view. White clapboard, green shutters, the porch where Howard and I used to sit after dinner. Locked, front and back, curtains drawn. I knocked. Nothing. Walked around the barn. His truck was gone. The workshop padlocked. I found the neighbor, Mrs. Adkins, 80 years old, always in her garden. "Haven't seen Howard in a couple weeks, dear. Gerald said he went to stay with a friend, somewhere up near Mansfield." A friend in Mansfield. Howard didn't have friends in Mansfield. He barely left the county. I called Gerald from the driveway. "Where's Grandpa?" "I told you, he's resting, staying with a buddy. Why do you keep pushing this?" "Because he's 81 and I can't reach him. If you'd just agreed to the payments, none of this would be happening." He hung up. That night, I sat in my apartment with every light off, just me and my phone. I texted Howard's number. Grandpa, it's Rachel. I love you. Please call me. The message showed as delivered. No reply. Diane sent a text at 9. Your grandfather is disappointed in you, Rachel. He told Gerald himself. Maybe if you showed some gratitude, things would be different. I read it twice. Set the phone on the counter. Stared at the wall. At 11:14 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. Area code 740, local. A woman's voice, low and careful. Is this Rachel Thornton? Yes. My name is Maggie Cole. I'm a charge nurse at St. Mary's Medical Center. Your grandfather was admitted 8 days ago. He has stage 4 cancer, and he has been asking for you. Every single day. My knees gave out. I caught the counter. Your father told us you refused to visit. So right now, I'm standing in my kitchen at 11 at night, gripping the counter with one hand, phone pressed to my ear. And a woman I've never met is telling me my grandfather has been crying my name for over a week. And my own father told the hospital I didn't want to come. If your parents ever use someone you love as a weapon to keep you in line, type, I know, in the comments. You don't have to explain, just those 2 words. And if you're still here, stay with me. Because what happened at that hospital the next morning is the reason I'm telling you this story tonight. I drove to St. Mary's in the dark. 40 minutes felt like 4 hours. The lobby was fluorescent and quiet, the kind of quiet that only hospitals have at midnight. Tile floors, vending machine humming, a security guard half asleep near the elevator. I walked to the front desk. Howard Thornton, room 412. The receptionist typed, looked at her screen and paused. I'm sorry, ma'am. Only approved visitors are allowed after hours. I'm his granddaughter. She scrolled again, then looked at me the way people look at you when they have bad news they didn't cause. Your name isn't on the approved list. The patient's son updated it yesterday. Only Gerald and Diane Thornton are authorized. I stood there. The floor felt like it was tilting. Can you call the room? Can you ask him? I'm sorry, I can't override the family contact's instructions. I stepped back, leaned against the wall. The hallway stretched in both directions, long, polished, empty. My father had removed my name from my own grandfather's visitor list, while my grandfather lay in a hospital bed asking for me. I pulled out my phone, thought about calling Gerald, thought about screaming into the receiver, thought about driving to Ridgefield Drive and pounding on his door until it splintered. I didn't do any of that. I was about to walk out when I heard a door open at the end of the corridor. Not the main entrance, a side door, half hidden behind a supply cart. A woman in navy scrubs stood in the doorway, mid-40s, short hair, reading glasses pushed up on her head. She looked both ways down the hall, then directly at me. She raised one hand and waved, small, deliberate, like a signal. Maggie Cole. She didn't say much as she led me through the side corridor. Staff hallway. Linoleum instead of tile. A cart of folded sheets against the wall. Your father came in on Tuesday, Maggie said, voice low. Told the front desk his daughter was estranged and didn't want contact. He updated the visitor list, removed your name, added his wife's. I'm not estranged. I know. She stopped at a door. Because your grandfather says your name about 40 times a day. He asked every nurse, every aide, every doctor who walked in. Has Rachel called? Did Rachel come? Your father told him you were too busy. She opened the door to room 412. The first thing I saw was the oxygen line, thin and clear, looped over his ears. Then the blanket, pulled up to his chest, too big for the body underneath. Howard had always been lean, but now he looked like he'd been erased in stages. Cheekbones sharp, wrists like kindling. His eyes were closed. The monitor beeped in a slow, steady rhythm. I stepped closer. My shoes squeaked on the floor. His eyes opened. For a second he just looked at me, like he was checking whether I was real. Then his face crumpled. Not a sound, just his whole expression folding inward, and tears sliding down into the hollows of his cheeks. Sweetheart. His voice was gravel and air. He told me you didn't want to come. He told me you didn't want to see me. Howard closed his eyes, opened them, reached under his pillow with a hand that trembled so badly the IV line shook. He pulled out a flip phone. Old Nokia. Scratched case, cracked screen. He pressed it into my palm and wrapped my fingers around it. Everything you need is in there. The number, the recording. He squeezed my hand. And my voice, in case I don't get to say it again. I sat with him for an hour, held his hand until his breathing slowed into sleep. Then I stepped into the hallway, back against the wall, and opened the phone. The screen was dim, battery at 14%, one saved audio file, one contact, Paul Whitfield, attorney, one voicemail. I pressed play on the audio file. Gerald's voice filled my ear, clear, casual, the way he talks when he thinks no one important is listening. Dad doesn't know I used the power of attorney. It expired last year, but the bank never checked. I moved $60,000 already. Another 20 next month and we're clear on the store. Then Diane. What about Rachel's payments? If she starts sending the $2,500, we can cover the rest of the mortgage. Gerald again. She'll pay. She's soft about the old man. Tell her he's disappointed in her. She'll fold. She always does. I pulled the phone away from my ear. My hand was shaking so hard I almost dropped it. I opened the voicemail. Howard's voice, steadier than it was tonight, maybe recorded weeks ago. Rachel, this is your grandpa. If you're hearing this, I'm probably gone or close to it. I changed my trust 2 years ago. I hired a lawyer named Paul Whitfield. His number's in this phone. Everything goes to you. The farm, the accounts, all of it. Paul has the papers. Don't let your father tell you otherwise. A pause, the sound of him breathing. I love you, sweetheart. I'm sorry my son turned out this way. You don't owe them a thing. Not a single dime. You hear me? Not one. The voicemail ended. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor. Maggie found me there 10 minutes later, phone clutched to my chest, forehead on my knees. She didn't ask questions. She just sat down beside me and waited. I called Paul Whitfield at 8:01 the next morning. His office opened at 8. I know because I checked the website at 6 while staring at a cold cup of coffee. He answered on the second ring. Older voice, measured. The kind of man who doesn't waste syllables. Miss Thornton, I've been expecting your call. Your grandfather told me you'd reach out eventually. I just hoped it wouldn't be this soon. I told him about the hospital, the visitor list, the recording. He listened without interrupting. Then he laid it out. Howard had come to him 2 years ago, right after being diagnosed. He suspected Gerald was misusing the power of attorney. Paul investigated and confirmed it. Gerald had been making withdrawals from Howard's accounts using a POA that expired 14 months prior. The bank hadn't flagged it. Gerald knew it was expired. He did it anyway. Your grandfather executed a revocable living trust, Paul said. Properly witnessed by 2 independent parties, notarized, with a cognitive assessment from his physician attached. You are the sole beneficiary. Everything? The farm, 45 acres on County Road 12. A brokerage account and savings totaling approximately $340,000. His truck, his personal property, all of it. I couldn't speak for a moment. Your grandfather was very specific, Paul continued. He said, and I'm quoting from my notes, my son chose money over his daughter. I'm choosing my granddaughter over my son. Does Gerald know about the trust? No. Gerald believes the old will is still in effect, the one that names him as primary beneficiary. He has no idea the trust exists. I asked what I should do. Paul's answer was simple. Nothing yet. When the time comes, I'll handle the reading. You just take care of yourself. I hung up and sat very still for a long time. Howard died on a Thursday. Maggie called me first. 6:42 a.m. She said it was peaceful, middle of the night, in his sleep. She said he'd spoken my name that evening, right before the sedation pulled him under. I thanked her. I don't remember hanging up. Gerald called 6 hours later. Noon, sharp. His voice was the same flat pitch he uses to discuss oil changes. Dad passed. Funeral's Saturday. Family only at the house after. Don't make a scene. I'll be there, I said. Saturday came cold and gray. The kind of Ohio October that smells like wood smoke and damp leaves. The church was small. Ridgedale Community, the one Howard attended for 40 years. Maybe 60 people in the pews. Gerald stood at the front, beside the casket. Dark suit, fresh haircut. Shaking hands. Receiving condolences with a nod and a tight jaw. Performing grief the way some men perform strength. Diane stood next to him in a black dress, dabbing her eyes with a tissue she kept folded in her palm. Dad wanted me to handle everything, Gerald told each person who approached. He trusted me completely. I sat in the fourth row. Nobody sat next to me. Kevin was 2 rows up, on his phone. Aunt Patricia squeezed my shoulder as she passed, but didn't stop. I kept my eyes on the casket. Oak. Simple. Howard would have approved. He built things from oak. Near the end of the service, I glanced toward the back of the church. Last pew, left side. A man in a gray suit sat alone, a leather briefcase on the seat beside him. Early 60s, wire-rimmed glasses, watching the proceedings without expression. Paul Whitfield. Our eyes met for exactly 1 second. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. I turned back to the casket. 72 hours. That's all Gerald had left. The house on Ridgefield Drive was full by 1 o'clock. 20-some relatives crammed into the living room and kitchen, casserole dishes on every flat surface. Someone had made a sheet cake that said, "In loving memory," in blue frosting. I stood near the back door with a glass of water I didn't drink. Gerald waited until the room was settled, people in chairs, on armrests, leaning against walls. Then he stood up near the fireplace, cleared his throat, and did what Gerald does best. He made it about himself. I have to be honest with everyone. His voice cracked, practiced, precise. This family is hurting. The store's been struggling. Medical bills are piling up, and I hate to say this in front of everyone, but Rachel has refused to help. Every head turned toward me, 20 pairs of eyes. Diane stepped in like a backup singer hitting her cue. We raised her, we gave her everything, and when we asked, not demanded, asked for help, she turned her back on this family. My cousin's wife whispered something behind her hand. Aunt Patricia looked at the floor. Uncle Dennis shifted in his chair. Gerald kept going. Dad would have wanted us to stick together. Dad would have wanted Rachel to do the right thing. Is that true, Rachel? Aunt Patricia's voice was careful, like she was handling something fragile. They gave you everything? I set my glass on the counter. I'm here to grieve my grandfather, I said, not to negotiate. Gerald spread his hands, palms up, like a man showing he's unarmed. See? She won't even have the conversation. Uncle Dennis cleared his throat. Gerald, maybe this isn't the place. No. Gerald's voice sharpened. Dad would want this settled. He said it with such certainty, like he knew exactly what Howard wanted. He had no idea. Diane moved closer. She had that look, the one she puts on when she wants the room to feel sorry for her. Soft eyes, slight tremble in the lip, hands clasped in front of her like a woman in a painting. Rachel, honey, her voice was syrup. I raised you like my own. I woke up at 5 every morning. I packed your lunches. I drove you to school. I sat in that emergency room when you broke your wrist in 6th grade. She paused. Let the silence do its work. And this is how you repay me? The room waited. I could feel the weight of it. Every cousin, every aunt, every neighbor holding casserole containers in judgment. I didn't answer. She wasn't finished. Diane tilted her head, lowered her voice just enough that everyone had to lean in. Your mother, God rest her soul, she would be ashamed of you. The room went still. Not quiet. Still. The kind of still where even the air stops circulating. I felt it land. Right in the center of my chest. She used my dead mother, at my grandfather's funeral, as a closing argument. I stood up straight. My hands weren't shaking. I looked directly at Diane. My mother died when I was 5, Diane. You don't get to use her name. Not today. Not ever. Gerald stepped forward. Sit down, Rachel. No. I picked up my jacket from the chair, walked to the door. The room parted without anyone deciding to move. They just did. At the threshold, I turned back. Not to Gerald. To the room. You'll hear from Grandpa's attorney on Tuesday. All of you. I stepped outside. The afternoon sun hit my face, sharp and cold. I walked to my car, started the engine, and pulled out of the driveway. I didn't cry. For the first time in my life, I didn't cry. My phone started buzzing before I reached the highway. Gerald. 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 9 calls in 2 hours. Then the texts. What attorney? Dad's will is with Harrison and Marks. Rachel, call me back right now. Whatever Dad told you, it's not what you think. Don't do anything stupid. I set the phone face down on the passenger seat and kept driving. At 7 p.m., Diane called Kevin. Kevin called me. His voice had that tentative quality it always gets when he's been handed a script he doesn't fully understand. Hey, Rach. Dad's really upset. Something about Grandpa's lawyer? What's going on? Kevin, I love you, but this isn't your business. He's my dad, too. I know, and I'm sorry about what's coming, but it's not my doing. He was quiet for a moment. You're scaring me. Good night, Kevin. I turned off my phone at 9, plugged it into the charger, let it sit on the kitchen counter like a brick. Somewhere across town, Gerald was tearing through the farmhouse. I know this because Mrs. Adkins, the neighbor, told me later. She watched him pull into Howard's driveway at dusk, unlock the door with his spare key, and spend 3 hours opening drawers, pulling files from the office, lifting floorboards in the workshop. He found nothing. Every document related to the trust, the original, the amendments, the cognitive assessment, the notarized signatures, sat in a locked cabinet at Paul Whitfield's office on East Broad Street. Howard had made sure of that. 2 years of quiet planning, and Gerald never suspected a thing. My grandfather built furniture for 50 years. He knew that the strongest joints are the ones you can't see from the outside. Tuesday was coming, and Gerald Thornton wasn't ready. Gerald sent me 14 texts that night. 14. And you know what every single one of them had in common? Not one of them said, I'm sorry. Not a single one said, I love you. Every message was about money, about control, about what I might take from him. If you've ever gotten a call from family that was only ever about what you owe, and never about who you are, drop a fire emoji in the comments. You'll know you're not alone down there. Tuesday is 3 days away, and the thing about Tuesdays, they always arrive. Tuesday, 10 a.m. Paul Whitfield's office on East Broad Street. The building was old brick, 2 stories, a law firm on the first floor, an insurance agency above it. Inside, the conference room had a long oak table, 6 leather chairs, and a window that looked out on the parking lot. No frills, just a room where things get decided. Gerald arrived 15 minutes early. I know because I parked across the street and watched. He walked in wearing his funeral suit again, hadn't bothered to change the tie. Diane followed in heels, chin up, purse against her ribs. Behind them, a man I didn't recognize, carrying a briefcase. Gerald had brought his own attorney. Kevin came alone, 5 minutes before 10, hands in his pockets. He looked like a kid walking into the principal's office. Uncle Dennis arrived last. He nodded at me in the lobby but didn't speak. Paul stood at the head of the table. Gray suit, wire glasses, the same leather briefcase from the church now open, contents arranged in precise stacks. He didn't waste time. I was retained by Howard Thornton 2 years ago to prepare and maintain his revocable living trust. This trust supersedes any prior testamentary documents. Gerald leaned forward. What trust? Dad's will is with Harrison and Marks. We've had the same family attorney for 20 years. Paul didn't blink. That will was revoked upon the execution of this trust. Gerald turned to his attorney, a younger man, mid-30s, already flipping through a legal pad. The attorney looked at Paul, then back at Gerald, and shook his head slightly. If a valid trust was executed after the will, the attorney said quietly, the trust controls. Gerald's jaw tightened. A muscle pulsed near his ear. Paul placed both hands flat on the table. Mr. Thornton, your father was very specific about his wishes. Shall I proceed? Paul opened the first document. Blue cover, notary seal visible at the bottom. He read slowly, every word calibrated. I, Howard James Thornton, of Licking County, Ohio, being of sound mind, do hereby declare this revocable living trust. The entirety of my estate, including the property at 1847 County Road 12, all financial accounts held at First Federal and Merrill, and all personal property, I leave to my granddaughter, Rachel Marie Thornton, as sole beneficiary. Gerald stood up so fast his chair rolled backward into the wall. That's not possible. I'm his son. I'm his only son. Paul continued as if Gerald hadn't moved. Mr. Thornton Sr. was of sound mind at the time of execution. The trust was witnessed by two independent parties, neither of whom had a familial or financial relationship with the grantor, and notarized by a registered notary in Licking County. He was 80 years old, Diane's voice cracked high. He was confused. He was sick. Paul reached into his briefcase and produced a second document. Attached is a cognitive capacity assessment conducted by Dr. Alan Morris, Mr. Thornton's primary physician, on the date of signing. The assessment confirms full mental competency. Gerald slammed his palm on the table. I'll contest this. I'll take it to probate. Every cent. That is your right, Paul said. He paused. Then he opened a third file, thicker than the first two. However, I am also obligated to inform you that during the preparation of this trust, my office identified a series of financial transactions from Mr. Thornton Sr.'s accounts. These transactions were conducted using a power of attorney that had expired 14 months prior to the first withdrawal. The room temperature dropped. I could feel it, not literally, but in the way everyone shifted. Paul looked at Gerald. Shall I continue? Gerald's attorney put a hand on Gerald's arm. Gerald shook it off. Mr. Thornton Sr., Paul said, requested that I preserve an audio recording as part of the trust file. He asked that the family be given the opportunity to hear it. He looked around the table. Does anyone object? Uncle Dennis spoke first. Play it. Gerald opened his mouth. Dennis cut him off. Play it, Mr. Whitfield. Paul pressed a button on the laptop. The room's speakers were small, just a conference phone dock, but they were enough. Gerald's voice filled the room, casual, confident, recorded. Dad doesn't know I used the power of attorney. It expired last year, but the bank never checked. I moved $60,000 already. Diane's voice next, thinner through the speakers. What about Rachel's payments? If she starts sending the $2,500, we can cover the rest of the mortgage. Gerald again. She'll pay. She's soft about the old man. Tell her he's disappointed. She'll fold. The recording ended. 6 seconds of silence, then longer. Diane stared at the table. Her hands were folded. She didn't look up. Kevin sat rigid, eyes wide, like someone who'd just been told the ground he was standing on wasn't solid. Uncle Dennis's knuckles were white around the arm of his chair. He turned to Gerald. You stole from Dad. That's taken out of context. What context, Gerald? Dennis's voice was low, controlled, and far more frightening than shouting. You used an expired document to drain our father's money while he was dying. Paul closed the laptop. The documentation of these withdrawals, totaling $87,000, has been compiled. Ms. Thornton will determine whether to pursue legal action. The room looked at me. I hadn't spoken since I sat down. I didn't ask for this, Dad, I said. Grandpa asked for this, because you gave him no other choice. I didn't raise my voice in that room, not once. I didn't have to. In the days that followed, Paul handled everything. Methodical, precise, the way Howard would have wanted it. First, the farm. Ownership transferred into the trust's name, then into mine. Clean deed, no encumbrances. The keys arrived in an envelope, 2 brass keys and a workshop padlock combination written on a post-it note in Howard's handwriting. Second, the bank accounts. Paul contacted First Federal with documentation showing the power of attorney Gerald used had expired 14 months before the first withdrawal. The bank opened an internal review. $87,000, flagged, frozen, traced to Gerald's business account. Third, and this was my decision, not Paul's, I chose not to file criminal charges. Paul prepared the full file. Transaction records, the expired POA, the recording, everything packaged, documented, ready. He placed it in a sealed envelope and told Gerald's attorney in writing, "This file will remain in our custody. If Mr. Gerald Thornton initiates harassment, contests the trust in bad faith, or interferes with Ms. Thornton's rights as beneficiary, it will be forwarded to the county prosecutor." Gerald's attorney called Paul that afternoon. The contest was withdrawn, and then the calls started. 28 times a day. Gerald's number, Diane's number, sometimes from Kevin's phone, which meant Diane had borrowed it. 28 calls. I counted because my phone logs the number. I didn't answer a single one, not out of spite, out of clarity. If even one of those calls had started with, "I'm sorry, maybe," If even one voicemail had said, I was wrong. Possibly. But I listened to the first 3 messages. They were all the same. Rachel, we need to talk about the farm. Rachel, the bank is threatening legal action. Rachel, you can't do this to your family. I didn't slam any doors. I just stopped opening them. The math caught up with Gerald fast. The auto parts store had been bleeding money for 2 years. I learned this later from Uncle Dennis, who'd finally started paying attention. Gerald had kept it afloat by drawing from Howard's accounts. With those accounts frozen and the bank demanding repayment of the $87,000, Gerald had nothing to fall back on. He tried to refinance the house on Ridgefield Drive, but the mortgage was already stretched. Equity wasn't enough. Diane, the woman who drove a pearl-white SUV she couldn't afford and remodeled the kitchen twice in 5 years, started receiving collection calls of her own. Credit cards, a personal loan neither of them had mentioned to the family. The community moved the way small towns do, slowly, then all at once. Gerald's regular customers at the store started driving to the chain shop on Route 161 instead. The pastor at Ridgedale Community, the same church where Howard's funeral had been held, had a private conversation with Gerald. I don't know what was said, but Gerald stopped attending. Diane deleted the Facebook post about ungrateful children. She deleted her entire account a week later. Uncle Dennis called me on a Wednesday evening. His voice was rough. I should have been paying attention, kid. I should have asked questions when Dad got sick. I'm sorry. You didn't know, I said. I should have. Kevin called too, the first honest conversation we'd had in years. I didn't know, Rachel. I swear. I didn't know about any of it. I believe you. But sorry has to come with change, Kevin, not just words. He was quiet. Then, I'm going to move out. Start of the year. 28 calls a day. That was November. By December, it dropped to 15. By January, 3, then 1, then silence. They didn't stop calling because they forgave me. They stopped because they ran out of things to ask for. Small towns have long memories. That's the thing nobody tells you about public accountability. You don't have to announce anything. The truth travels on its own. By February, everyone in Gerald's orbit knew some version of what happened. Not the exact details. Paul kept the legal files sealed, but enough. Dennis told his wife. His wife told her sister. Her sister played bridge with 3 women from the church. Gerald wrote me a letter in March, 4 pages, handwritten. I sat on the porch of the farmhouse and read it with a mug of coffee going cold in my hand. It wasn't an apology. It was an explanation. I was under pressure. The store was failing. I had debts I couldn't cover. I did what I had to do for this family. You have to understand. I didn't plan for it to go this far. I was trying to keep things together. He used the word family 11 times. He used the word sorry 0. I folded the letter, put it in the kitchen drawer, and didn't reply. That same week, I drove to the farm for the first time as its owner. Not as a visitor, not as a guest. Mine. The workshop was exactly how Howard left it. Sawdust in the grooves of the floor, his tools hung on pegboard, each one outlined in markers so you knew where it went. The air smelled like oak and mineral oil. On his workbench, under a piece of canvas, I found an envelope. My name on the front in his handwriting, the same block letters he used on everything. Inside, 1 sheet of paper. Take care of this place, Rachel. It was always yours. Grandpa. I held that piece of paper for a long time. Then I hung it on the wall, right next to his level. 3 months passed. I kept my job at the firm. Same cubicle, same fluorescent lights, same boss microwaving fish on Tuesdays. I didn't quit. I didn't need to. The farm earned modest income. I leased 30 of the 45 acres to a neighboring soybean operation. Enough to cover property taxes, maintenance, and a little left over. I spent weekends there. Fixed the porch railing, replaced the kitchen faucet. Started a vegetable garden along the south side of the house. Tomatoes, peppers, squash. Howard would have called it a good start. I set boundaries with Gerald and Diane, not through a dramatic phone call, through Paul. A single letter, sent certified mail. All communication between Gerald and Diane Thornton and my client shall be directed through this office. Personal contact, including phone calls, texts, and unannounced visits, is not authorized. They tested it once. Diane showed up at the farm on a Saturday in April. I saw her SUV from the kitchen window. She sat in the driveway for 20 minutes. I didn't go out. Eventually, she backed out and drove away. That was the last time. Kevin came out to the farm in May. We sat on the porch with iced tea and talked more honestly than we had in our entire lives. "I'm sorry I never stood up for you," he said. "At the table, at the funeral, all of it. I know you are. But sorry has to come with something, Kevin. It has to come with change." He nodded slowly. "I moved out last month, got a place in Reynoldsburg." "Good." I visited Howard's grave every Sunday, brought coffee, black the way he drank it, set it on the headstone and sat in the grass and talked. About the farm, the garden, the weather, about nothing and everything. The silence at the farmhouse wasn't empty. It was the first peace I'd had in 29 years. I'm not telling you this story so you'll hate my father. I'm telling it because maybe you're sitting somewhere right now, in your car, in your kitchen, on a break at work, and you've got a spreadsheet in your head too. Maybe it's not literally an Excel file. Maybe it's just a voice, a parent, a partner, a sibling, reminding you of everything you owe, every sacrifice they made, every dollar they spent, every inconvenience you caused by existing. And maybe you've been carrying that weight so long you forgot it wasn't yours to begin with. I carried mine for 29 years. I let Gerald and Diane convince me that their decision to raise me was a debt I had to repay, that the food on the table came with an invoice, and the roof over my head was a loan I never agreed to. It wasn't. Raising a child is a choice, not a transaction. And love, real love, doesn't come with terms and conditions. It doesn't arrive in a spreadsheet. It doesn't threaten to cut you off if you don't pay on time. My grandfather understood that. He showed it in every birdhouse we built, every egg we scrambled, every quiet evening on the porch where he said nothing but was fully present. He told me once, I was maybe 14, and I'd said something about feeling like a burden. He put down his sanding block and looked at me. "You don't owe people for love, Rachel. Real love doesn't send invoices." I don't know what the future holds with Gerald. Maybe one day he'll call, and the first word will be sorry. Not Rachel, we need to talk about the farm. Maybe. If that day comes, I'll listen. But today, I choose peace. And I choose the boundary I should have set a long time ago. I didn't cut my father off. I stopped bleeding for him. It's Saturday evening as I'm telling you this. I'm sitting on Howard's porch, my porch now, I suppose, though it still feels like his. The sun's going down behind the tree line, turning everything gold and amber. The fields are quiet. A cardinal's been sitting on the fence post for the last 10 minutes, just watching me like it's got opinions. The flip phone is on the table beside me. I charged it last week. I keep it charged. Not because I need the evidence anymore. Paul has copies of everything. I keep it because of that voicemail. Howard's voice, recorded on a Tuesday afternoon 2 years ago, steady and clear, and full of every single thing my father never said to me. Last week, I found something in the workshop. I was reorganizing Howard's tool wall, putting things back in their outlines. When I pulled open a bottom drawer I'd never checked. Inside was a wooden box, small, maple. My initials carved into the lid, RMT, in Howard's precise, careful script. I opened it. Baby photos, a dozen of them. Me at 1, at 2, at 3, at 4. Me and my mother in the backyard of the house on Ridgefield Drive, before everything changed. The photos Diane threw away when she redecorated. Howard saved every single one. 28 missed calls a day. That number's down to 0 now. But there's one voice I still listen to every night before I turn off the lights. I press play, and I hear him. "You don't owe them a thing, sweetheart." And I believe him. If you're out there carrying a debt you never signed for, put it down. Walk away from the table. It was never yours. That weight you're holding, you can set it down right now. Nobody gets to charge you for being alive. That's my story. If it hits something real for you, I want to hear yours. Type one word in the comments, just one, that describes what your family said you owed them. Was it money, loyalty, silence, gratitude? Whatever it is, leave it below. The most powerful answers might show up in my next video. And if you want to hear another story about someone who refused to carry a debt that wasn't hers, I left a link in the description. It's about a woman whose mother demanded her entire wedding fund back the week before the ceremony. You don't want to miss how that one ends. Hit subscribe so it's waiting for you. I'll see you there.